Welcome to our channel and our journey through the Titanic's cargo, 100 objects still at the bottom, a deep sleep inventory. 2.5 miles beneath the surface of the North Atlantic, in complete darkness and crushing pressure, lies what remains of the RMS Titanic. The ship that was called unsinkable now rests in two massive sections on the ocean floor, surrounded by a debris field that stretches for miles. Tonight, we're going to walk through this underwater museum together. We'll examine 100 objects that remain on the seafloor. Some are massive pieces of the ship's structure. Others are small, personal items that tell individual stories. Each one is a physical connection to the 2,224 people who were aboard during the maiden voyage. The wreck site is vast. The bow section sits upright, relatively intact. The stern section, about 600 meters away, is completely destroyed. Between them, scattered across the sand, are the contents of the ship. Let's begin our descent. Object 1. Steel. Hull plates and framing ribs. At the outer edge of the wreck site, large sections of the Titanic's steel hull lie resting on the seabed, some upright and others collapsed into the sediment. Corrosion has thinned the outer plating, exposing the internal framing ribs that once distributed structural stress along the ship's length. Rusticles formed by iron-consuming bacteria hang from the metal and continue to degrade it at a slow, constant rate. What was engineered for rigidity and motion now exists in a stable, unmoving state, gradually returning to the surrounding environment. Object 2. Porthole frames still set in hull sections. Circular porthole frames remain fixed within fractured sections of the hull, their glass long absent due to impact and collapse. The frames are evenly spaced and still follow the original deck layout, allowing the former positions of cabins and corridors to be identified. Each opening leads into darkness, with seawater moving freely through interior voids and equalizing pressure. The portholes no longer function as windows, but as structural reference points that preserve the ship's internal organization. Object 3. Sections of the double-bottom spine of the ship. Beneath the wreck, sections of the Titanic's double bottom are visible, composed of thick, reinforced steel designed to increase hull strength. These components have been bent and displaced, likely during impact with the seabed and subsequent collapse. Sediment has accumulated along their edges, anchoring them in place. Once hidden beneath the ship, these structures now lie exposed, illustrating the scale and engineering approach of early 20th century ocean liner construction. Object 4. Broken decks and collapsed deck beams. Sections of deck plating and structural beams lie folded inward, forming layered fields of steel across the seabed. Some beams remain aligned in their original orientation, while others are bent under their own weight following structural failure during the breakup. Fine sediment has settled evenly across the surfaces, indicating long-term stability. These collapsed decks mark where passengers once walked, now reduced to flattened structural remnants resting in silence. Object 5. Remains of the 4 funnels and funnel casings. Fragments of the Titanic's funnels are scattered across the wreck site, consisting mainly of curved steel casing sections. The internal support structures are exposed where the outer shells collapsed during descent and impact. Original paint and markings are no longer visible, replaced by corrosion and marine growth. These fragments indicate the former vertical scale of the ship and its steam-powered propulsion system. Object 6. Ventilation cowls and ductwork. Detached ventilation cowls lie on the seabed with their openings facing sideways or downward, partially filled with sediment. These structures once directed fresh air into lower decks and machinery spaces through a network of ducts. Their displaced positions reflect the collapse of surrounding deck structures. Now inactive, they remain as fixed markers of the ship's environmental control systems. Object 7. Anchor chain and chain lockers. Heavy anchor chains extend across the seabed near the bow, with individual links clearly visible and coated in corrosion. The mass of the chain has kept it close to its original location despite the ship's breakup. Nearby, the remains of the chain lockers are open and distorted, their structural boundaries partially collapsed. Together, they indicate the forwardmost operational systems of the ship. Object 8, cargo cranes and davits. Torn from the boat deck steel. Cargo cranes and davits rest where they fell during structural failure, their arms bent and mounting points fractured. Cables trail loosely across the sediment, no longer under tension. These mechanisms were used to lift cargo and manage equipment during loading operations. Their current positions reflect the abrupt loss of structural support during the sinking. Object 9, winches, capstans and mooring gear. Mechanical winches and capstans remain attached to fragmented sections of deck, their rounded housings and gear teeth still identifiable. Marine organisms have colonized all exposed surfaces, softening sharp edges. These components once managed lines and anchors during docking and maneuvering. Now inactive, they remain in fixed positions defined by collapse rather than use. Object 10. Ornamental metalwork from railings and gates. Decorative metal railings and gate fragments lie flattened across the seabed, their original patterns still faintly visible despite corrosion. Upright elements have broken at stress points, leaving thin sections pressed into the sediment. These pieces once lined promenades and open decks, separating spaces by class and function. Their distortion reflects both structural collapse and long-term exposure. Object 11. Stairway landings and balustrade fragments. Sections of stairway landings lie separated from surrounding structures, with metal balustrade fragments bent and detached. The arrangement of these pieces suggests former vertical passageways connecting multiple decks. Stress fractures and distortion indicate failure during collapse rather than impact alone. These fragments mark the internal circulation spaces of the ship, now flattened and dispersed. Object 12. Steel doors and watertight bulkhead remnants. Heavy steel doors are scattered throughout the wreck, some embedded in collapsed bulkheads and others resting flat on the seabed. These doors were designed to seal compartments and limit flooding. Their displaced positions show that the integrity of the watertight system was lost during breakup. Corrosion has softened edges, but structural outlines remain clear. Object 13. Crumpled sections of the bridge wing structures. Fragments of the bridge wings lie near the forward wreck, with metal folded and twisted under compressive forces. Mounting points for railings and instruments remain attached in places. The deformation suggests collapse during descent rather than gradual failure. These pieces define the ship's former command extensions beyond the bridge. Object 14. Steering gear fragments near the stern. Near the stern section, components of the steering system are visible, including shafts, housings, and linkage elements. These parts once transmitted commands from the bridge to the rudder. Their separation and misalignment indicate structural failure after the ship broke apart. The machinery now rests inert, partially buried in sediment. Object 50. Propeller shafting and bearing housings. Long sections of propeller shafting extend outward from the stern debris field, with bearing housings still attached. The cylindrical forms remain well defined despite corrosion. These shafts once transferred rotational energy from the engines to the propellers. Their exposed length emphasizes the scale of the ship's propulsion system. Object 16. Massive boilers from the forward boiler rooms. Several large cylindrical boilers rest upright on the seabed, their riveted steel construction still visible. These units were forced out of the hull as internal decks collapsed. Corrosion has progressed unevenly across their surfaces. The boilers remain among the most recognizable components of the wreck due to their size and density. Object 17. Sections of reciprocating engine components and pipes. Fragments of engine components and steam pipes lie separated from their original assemblies. Some machined surfaces remain smooth, while others show fracture patterns from mechanical stress. These parts once regulated steam flow and mechanical motion. Their scattered distribution reflects violent internal collapse. Object 18. Telegraph and telephone. Wiring runs. Bundles of insulated wiring stretch across collapsed decks, following original routing paths along walls and ceilings. The insulation has degraded, exposing metal conductors beneath. These lines once carried voice and signal communication throughout the ship. They now lie inactive, tracing former functional networks. Object 19, electrical junction boxes and switches. Metal junction boxes remain fixed to bulkhead fragments, with switch housings open and internal components visible. These units distributed electrical power to lighting and equipment. Corrosion has penetrated enclosures, but overall form remains identifiable. Their presence marks former control and utility zones. Object 20, fragments of telegraph indicators and dials. Broken indicator faces and dial components lie among surrounding mechanical debris. Markings and pointer mounts are still visible on some surfaces. These instruments communicated engine commands between the bridge and engine rooms. Now separated and silent, they represent lost coordination systems. Object 21, collapsed lifeboat davits. Lying in the debris field, steel lifeboat. Davits rest in collapsed positions across the seabed, their curved arms and mounting bases still identifiable. These structures once supported and lowered lifeboats from the boat deck. Fractures at attachment points indicate failure during structural collapse rather than controlled release. Their final positions mark the locations where evacuation systems once operated. Object 22, lifeboat winch mechanisms and blocks. Winch components and pulley blocks lie scattered near the davits, detached from their original mounts. Grooves worn smooth by rope movement remain visible. These mechanisms once controlled the descent of lifeboats. Now inactive, they rest where gravity and breakup placed them. Object 23, fragments of lifeboat planking and fittings. Pieces of wooden planking are preserved where protected by sediment, with metal fittings still attached in some areas. The wood is darkened and structurally weakened by prolonged exposure. These fragments represent the remains of lifeboats that were damaged or destroyed during the sinking. Their distribution reflects breakage rather than orderly deployment. Object 24, metal brackets from life rafts and emergency gear. Small metal brackets and mounting fittings are scattered across the debris field. These components once secured emergency equipment to the ship's structure. Corrosion is advanced, but overall shapes remain intact. Their presence indicates the locations of auxiliary safety systems. Object 25, remains of railings where boats were swung out. Sections of deck railing lie bent and flattened, with upright posts broken at their bases. The curved alignment follows the original deck edge. These railings once bordered lifeboat handling areas. Their deformation records the loss of deck integrity. Object 26, boat deck light standards and posts. Light standards from the boat deck rest at angles on the seabed, their lamp housings missing or damaged. These posts once illuminated open deck areas during night operations. Corrosion and a marine growth now cover all exposed surfaces. They remain as vertical reference markers within the debris. Object 27, signal bell brackets and related fittings. Metal brackets used to mount signal bells remain attached to fragments of deck structure. Mounting holes and bolts are clearly visible, though the bells themselves are absent. These fittings once supported audible signaling equipment. Their survival reflects the durability of simple structural components. Object 28, emergency ladder sections. Straight ladder sections lie flat in the sediment, with evenly spaced rungs still aligned. These ladders provided vertical access between decks during emergencies. Their undisturbed placement suggests limited post-impact movement. They now serve only as structural outlines. Object 29, damaged crow's nest and mast fragments. Fragments of the mast and crow's nest are scattered beyond the main wreck. Cylindrical mast sections are broken and partially buried. These structures once supported lookout and navigation functions high above the deck. Their distance from the hull reflects separation during breakup. Object 30, navigation lamp housings. Metal housings for navigation lamps lie open and empty, with glass lenses missing. The frames are coated in corrosion and marine growth. These lamps once signaled the ship's position and direction. Now inactive, they remain as fixed markers of external communication systems. Object 31, tons of loose coal, spilled from ruptured bunkers. Large fields of coal are spread across the seabed near the wreck, consisting of irregular fragments partially embedded in sediment. These deposits mark the locations of former fuel bunkers that ruptured during the sinking. The coal has remained largely unchanged due to its composition and density. Its distribution provides clear reference points for internal damage patterns. Object 32. Rolled steel drums and containers from the holed cylindrical steel drums rest on their sides within the debris field, their surfaces dented and heavily corroded. Some ends are open, allowing sediment to fill the interiors. These containers once held industrial cargo. Their presence indicates the contents of lower cargo holds. Object 33 off of her. Pieces of cargo machinery and derrick fittings. Detached metal components from cargo handling systems lie scattered nearby, including gears, brackets, and mounting plates. These parts once formed derricks used for loading and unloading freight. Corrosion has reduced sharp edges, but mechanical shapes remain identifiable. Their displacement reflects structural failure in the holds. Object 34. Lead and metal cargo items that resist decay. Dense metal cargo items lie undisturbed where they settled after the sinking. Their mass has limited movement over time. Corrosion is present but less advanced than on steel structures. These materials persist as stable elements within the debris field. Object 35. Cargo crates, reduced to metal fasteners and contents. Wooden cargo crates have decayed, leaving behind nails, straps, and hinges arranged in rectangular outlines. In some cases, original contents remain within these boundaries. These traces indicate how organic materials decomposed while metal components endured. The shapes preserve the former organization of the holds. Object 36. Loose shipping labels and metal tags. Thin metal tags lie flat in the sediment, with stamped lettering faint but sometimes legible. These labels once identified cargo destinations and handling instructions. Their survival reflects the durability of thin metal under deep-sea conditions. They offer limited but direct evidence of cargo logistics. Object 37. Bottles of wine and champagne, some still corked glass. Bottles are found upright or partially buried in sediment, with some still sealed by intact corks. The glass has resisted pressure and corrosion better than many materials. These bottles once formed part of passenger provisions and cargo. Their preservation provides insight into storage practices. Object 38. Glass jars and preserved food containers. Clear and opaque glass jars rest among other cargo remains, often without lids. The original contents have long since dissolved or dispersed. The jars themselves remain structurally intact. They mark storage areas for preserved foods. Object 39. Metal tins from canned provisions. Flattened metal cans are scattered across the wreck site, their seams and lids still visible. Corrosion has progressed unevenly across their surfaces. These tins once held preserved food supplies. Their distribution reflects collapse within storage compartments. Object 40. Luggage trunks that were never recovered. Large luggage trunks lie collapsed or partially open, with leather coverings decayed and the metal frames exposed. Locks and hinges remain attached. These trunks once held personal belongings stored in the holds. Their presence marks unclaimed private property within the wreck. Object 41. Pieces of decorative wood panelling from public rooms. Sections of carved wood panelling lie detached from surrounding structures, darkened and softened by long-term water exposure. Decorative patterns remain visible where surfaces are protected. These panels once lined public rooms and corridors. Their condition illustrates the degradation of organic materials in deep-sea environments. Object 42. Flooring tiles from public rooms and corridors. Ceramic floor tiles are scattered across the seabed in small clusters, with some remaining aligned in original patterns. Others are fractured and mixed with sediment. These tiles once covered heavily trafficked interior spaces. Their survival reflects the durability of fired ceramics. Object 43. Curtain rails and window fittings. Metal curtain rails and window fittings lie bent and detached from walls, with mounting brackets still attached in places. These components once supported fabric coverings in cabins and public rooms. Corrosion has reduced their structural integrity. Their placement outlines former window positions. Object 44. Light fixtures and wall sconces. Wall-mounted light fixtures rest among interior debris, with glass shades missing and wiring exposed. Metal arms and mounts remain recognizable despite corrosion. These fixtures once provided electric illumination throughout the ship. Their remains mark former lighting points. Object 45. Chandelier frames and arms. Large chandelier frames lie inverted or on their sides, with curved arms extending outward in regular patterns. Decorative glass elements are absent. These structures once illuminated major public spaces. Their scale reflects the design emphasis of first-class interiors. Object 46. Brass nameplates and plaques. Flat brass plates lie face-up in the sediment, with engraved lettering still legible in places. Tarnish has darkened their surfaces but preserved inscriptions. These plaques once identified rooms and ship features. Their survival highlights the durability of copper alloys. Object 47. Cabin number plates and signage. Small metal number plates are scattered near interior spaces with stamped or engraved markings intact. These signs once guided passengers through the ship. Their arrangement helps identify former cabin locations. They now rest as isolated markers. Object 48. Door handles and lock plates. Metal door handles and lock plates lie detached from doors, with keyholes and mounting points clearly defined. Corrosion has softened edges, but overall form remains intact. These components once controlled access to private spaces. Their separation reflects structural collapse. Object 49. Emblems and badges from doors and furniture. Decorative emblems and badges are found loose among debris, some retaining raised lettering or symbols. These items once marked ownership, class designation, or manufacturer identity. Marine growth covers portions of their surfaces. Their presence indicates the level of interior detail. Object 50. Fragments of framed pictures and mirrors. Broken frame pieces and mirror fragments lie flat on the seabed, with reflective surfaces clouded or fractured. Wooden frame elements have largely decayed. These objects once decorated cabins and public rooms. Their remains illustrate the loss of fragile materials. Object 51. Fragments of the grand staircase structure. Large structural fragments from the grand staircase lie scattered within the wreck, including curved supports and flat sections that indicate the original geometry of the space. Wood and metal components are separated, with organic material heavily degraded. These fragments mark one of the ship's central architectural features. Their dispersion reflects collapse rather than intact descent. Object 52. Bronze cherub pieces from the grand staircase. Small bronze fragments from decorative cherub figures are found near staircase debris. The metal surfaces are darkened but relatively smooth, with facial features and wing details partially preserved. Bronze has resisted corrosion better than surrounding materials. These fragments represent ornamental elements from the ship's most elaborate interior space. Object 53. Statues and decorative figures from interiors. Decorative statues are present as broken sections, with bases, limbs, and torsos separated. Surface details are softened by corrosion and marine growth. These figures once served aesthetic functions in public rooms. Their fragmentation reflects both impact forces and long-term structural failure. Object 54. Piano and musical instrument pieces. Wooden and metal components from musical instruments lie scattered among interior debris, including frames, strings, and key mechanisms. Wooden elements are largely decayed, while metal parts remain identifiable. These instruments once accompanied social activities aboard the ship. Their remains indicate the presence of organized entertainment spaces. Object 55. Dining room chairs and chair hardware. Metal chair frames and fittings are found near former dining areas, with wooden components almost entirely absent. Bolts, brackets, and supports outline seating arrangements that once filled large rooms. Corrosion has reduced detail, but general shapes remain. These remnants reflect the scale of communal dining facilities. Object 56. Bathtubs from first and second class cabins. Porcelain bathtubs rest detached from surrounding walls, with smooth surfaces stained and fractured. Plumbing connections are exposed at one end. These fixtures once provided private sanitation in higher class cabins. Their preservation highlights the durability of ceramic materials under deep-sea conditions. Object 57. Wash basins and sinks. Scattered around the wreck. Ceramic wash basins are found upright or on their sides, some intact and others broken. Sediment has collected inside the bowls, stabilizing their positions. These fixtures once served cabins and shared washrooms. Their distribution marks former residential areas. Object 58. Bathroom plumbing, pipes, taps and valves. Metal pipes, taps and valves lie tangled together on the seabed, with threaded joints and control knobs still visible. Corrosion has fused some components into fixed clusters. These systems once distributed water throughout the ship. Their remains trace internal service routes. Object 59. Bed springs and the metal bed frames. Coiled bed springs are flattened and partially embedded in sediment, with metal bed frames outlining former sleeping areas. Spring spacing remains uniform despite deformation. These components once supported passenger accommodation. Their survival contrasts with the loss of mattresses and fabric. Object 60. Table legs and metal table mounts detached. Table legs lie parallel across the seabed, with mounting plates and bolts still attached. These supports once held cabin and public room tables in place. Corrosion has softened edges, but structural form remains. Their arrangement reflects interior collapse patterns. Object 61. Ceramic jugs and water pitchers. White ceramic jugs and water pitchers rest in small clusters, with handles and spouts intact on some examples. Fine cracks run across their surfaces caused by pressure and long-term exposure. These vessels once supplied drinking water in cabins and dining areas. Their preservation reflects the durability of glazed ceramics. Object 62. Broken gauges and instrument faces. Circular gauge faces lie separated from their housings, with number markings and pointer mounts still visible. Glass covers are missing or shattered. These instruments once monitored pressure, temperature, and mechanical performance. Their remains indicate former control points. Object 63. Engine room tools and tool chests. Metal tools are scattered near collapsed structural elements, with some remaining inside open tool chests. Handles show signs of wear from use. Corrosion has bonded some tools to surrounding surfaces. These items once supported maintenance and emergency repairs. Object 64. Fire extinguishers and fire main fittings. Cylindrical fire extinguishers lie against debris, with valves and hose connections still attached. Identification markings are faint, but present. These devices formed part of the ship's fire suppression system. Their survival indicates standardized safety equipment. Object 65. Fire hose nozzles and couplings. Brass hose nozzles and couplings lie grouped together, with threaded sections clearly defined. Corrosion is minimal compared to steel components. These fittings once connected hoses to pressurized water lines. Their placement reflects emergency equipment storage locations. Object 66. Cooking pots and pans. From the galley large, metal cooking vessels rest overturned or stacked, with handles and rims still attached. Silt has accumulated inside open surfaces. These items once served mass food preparation in the ship's kitchens. Their scale reflects institutional cooking requirements. Object 67. Kitchen utensils, such as ladles and strainers. Long-handled utensils lie scattered across the seabed, with perforations and strainers still visible. The metal surfaces are evenly corroded. These tools once supported food preparation and serving. Their dispersion reflects galley collapse. Object 68. Metal serving trays and stands. Flat serving trays rest face down or partially buried, with raised edges and decorative borders still defined. Supporting stands lie collapsed nearby. These items once carried meals in dining rooms. Their arrangement indicates storage areas. Object 69. Stacks of perfectly aligned porcelain dishes. Groups of porcelain plates remain stacked in orderly piles, suggesting they settled together as compartments collapsed. Many are intact and unbroken. These dishes once served passengers across classes. Their alignment indicates minimal disturbance after settling. Object 70. Hundreds of ogun. Pattern dining plates. Decorated dining plates bearing the ogun pattern are spread across the sand, with printed designs faded but recognizable. Some plates overlap in shallow layers. These items were used extensively in dining service. Their quantity reflects the scale of onboard catering. Object 71. Bowls and serving platters in the sand. Large, serving bowls rest open side up on the seabed, while platters are partially buried with only their edges exposed. Fine sediment outlines their circular forms. These items once supported communal dining service. Their placement suggests storage areas that collapsed vertically. Object 72. Cups and saucers from various classes. Small cups and saucers are scattered individually and in pairs, with handles intact on many pieces. Variations in thickness and decoration reflect differences between passenger classes. The porcelain has resisted pressure and corrosion. These items mark everyday dining activity. Object 73. Cutlery, knives, forks, and spoons. Metal cutlery lies in loose clusters, with blades and tines bent or worn smooth. Corrosion has dulled the surfaces, but overall shapes remain identifiable. These utensils once served repeated daily use. Their grouping reflects storage rather than table settings. Object 74. Wine decanters and glass bottles. Clear glass decanters and bottles lie on their sides, some fractured and others intact. Necks and bases remain visible among the debris. Glass has resisted long-term degradation better than many materials. These vessels once held beverages for passenger service. Object 75. Broken glassware and drinking glasses. Shards of glass form small fields across the seabed, with some drinking glasses remaining partially intact. Edges have been rounded by time and movement. These remains indicate areas of concentrated storage or service. Light reflects faintly from unbroken surfaces. Object 76. Leather shoes and boots, lying in pairs. Pairs of leather shoes rest close together, with leather heavily degraded and soles still defined. Stitching and laces are sometimes visible. These items once belonged to individual passengers. Their paired placement suggests minimal movement after settling. Object 77. Suitcases and bags with partly decayed leather suitcases lie collapsed or partially open, with metal frames and locks intact and fabric linings exposed. Leather coverings have deteriorated unevenly. These containers once held personal effects. Their condition reflects prolonged exposure and pressure. Object 78. Clothing fragments and fabric remnants. Small sections of fabric are preserved where protected by sediment, with weaves and seams still identifiable. Colours are muted and uneven. These fragments once formed garments worn aboard the ship. Their survival is limited to low exposure areas. Object 79. Hairbrushes and combs. Hairbrushes lie with bristles flattened against the sand, while combs remain largely intact with evenly spaced teeth. Materials show minimal displacement. These personal grooming items once belonged to passengers and crew. Their small size contrasts with surrounding debris. Object 80. Hand mirrors with surviving glass. Hand mirrors rest face up or face down in the sediment, with reflective surfaces clouded but present. Frames are corroded or broken. These objects once served personal use in cabins. Their reflective quality is now muted by time. Object 81. Spectacle frames and eyeglasses. Metal spectacle frames lie folded or distorted, with lenses missing or fractured. Hinges remain attached in many examples. These items once corrected vision for individual passengers. Their small scale and minimal movement indicate they settled quickly after descent. Object 82. Writing instruments and fountain pens. Writing instruments and pen fragments are scattered among interior debris, with metal casings intact and internal components exposed. Ink reservoirs are empty. These objects once supported correspondence and record-keeping. Their presence indicates personal and administrative use. Object 83, pocket watches. Similar to recovered examples. Round watch cases lie without chains, with glass covers cracked or absent. Number markings and hands are sometimes visible. These timepieces once regulated personal schedules aboard the ship. They now remain permanently stopped. Object 84, coins and small metal keepsakes. Small metal objects lie clustered in shallow depressions, with stamped details and edges clearly defined. Precious and semi-precious metals show limited corrosion. These items once served monetary or sentimental value. Their durability has preserved fine detail. Object 85. Jewelry items, such as brooches and chains. Thin chains and small decorative pieces lie tangled together, with clasps and settings still recognizable. Precious metals show less corrosion than surrounding materials. These items once served ornamental purposes. Their presence indicates personal belongings rather than ship fittings. Object 86. Remains of the Marconi radio room equipment. Fragments of radio transmitters and receivers lie within collapsed structural sections, including dials, coils, and metal housings. Wiring runs extend away from the equipment. These components once enabled long-range communication. Their condition reflects internal collapse. Object 87. Signal lantern fittings and lenses. Metal lantern frames rest without their original light sources, with some glass lenses nearby and partially buried. Mounting brackets remain attached. These lanterns once provided visual signaling. Their remains mark communication points. Object 88. Telegraph indicators and control remnants. Indicator housings lie broken open, with directional markings and pointer mounts exposed. These devices once relayed engine and navigation commands. Corrosion has softened details, but function is still evident. They now rest silent. Object 89, electrical switches and broken wiring runs. Wall-mounted switches remain attached to bulkhead fragments, with wires trailing outward along former routing paths. Insulation is degraded or missing. These systems once controlled lighting and equipment. Their remains trace electrical distribution networks. Object 90. Bridge control fragments and telemotor pieces. Mechanical components from bridge control systems lie scattered near the forward wreck, including rods, cylinders, and valve housings. These parts once translated steering commands to the rudder. Their separation indicates system failure during breakup. Object 91. Wall sconces and decorative lamp arms. Decorative lamp arms extend from broken mounting points, with curved metal forms still intact. Glass shades are absent. These fixtures once provided ambient lighting in corridors and cabins. Their remains mark former illumination points within interior spaces. Object 92. Statues reduced to fragments. Small statue fragments are scattered across the seabed, with surfaces worn smooth by corrosion and marine growth. Original forms can only be partially inferred. These pieces once served decorative roles. Their condition reflects the vulnerability of sculptural detail. Object 93. Miscellaneous unidentified metal fragments. Irregular metal pieces lie without clear function, with softened edges and distorted shapes. Corrosion and breakage have removed identifying features. These fragments once formed part of larger assemblies. Their purpose is no longer discernible. Object 94. Miscellaneous ceramic fragments. Broken ceramic pieces are mixed with sediment, with glazed surfaces reflecting faint light. Patterns are incomplete and fragmented. These shards once belonged to household or decorative items. Their survival contrasts with organic materials. Object 95. Rusted fasteners and bolts. Bolts and screws are embedded in the seabed, with thread patterns still visible. These fasteners once held structural components together. Corrosion has fused some in place. they now remain as small but numerous remnants. Object 96. Corroded hinges and brackets. Flat metal hinges and brackets lie opened or twisted, with mounting holes evenly spaced. Some joints are fused by corrosion. These components once allowed movement and attachment. Their immobility reflects long-term exposure. Object 97. Fused glass and metal remnants. Irregular pieces of fused glass and metal are present, with uneven and opaque surfaces. These forms likely resulted from heat and pressure during structural failure. Original shapes are lost. They remain as material composites. Object 98. Unidentifiable personal effects. Small objects remain whose original use is unclear, offering limited clues through size and shape alone. These items likely belong to passengers or crew. Their identity has been erased by time. They rest undisturbed. Object 99. Scattered fragments beyond recognition. Tiny fragments cover portions of the seabed, forming a continuous layer of material. No distinct features remain. These pieces represent the final breakdown of larger objects. They merge into the surrounding sediment. Object 100. The quiet debris field itself. The debris field extends outward from the main wreck, with objects settled and motionless across the sand. Spatial distribution reflects the ship's breakup and descent. No movement remains beyond slow currents. The site exists in a state of long-term equilibrium. As our walk through the debris field comes to an end, the objects no longer appear as individual artifacts, but as part of a single, settled landscape resting quietly beneath 2.5 miles of water. Nothing here is waiting to be discovered in a hurry. The pressure, the cold and the darkness have stabilized everything into long-term stillness. Steel continues to corrode at a measured pace. Ceramics remain unchanged. Glass reflects no light. The ocean moves slowly overhead, unaware of names, dates, or stories. What remains of the Titanic is no longer a ship and no longer an event, but a fixed environment, shaped by physics rather than memory. Each object we have passed now rests exactly where it will remain, disturbed only by occasional currents and the passage of time. There are no sounds here beyond the movement of water, no signals, no schedules, no urgency. The wreck does not progress forward, and it does not return. It simply exists. As we leave the site, the distance between the bow and stern fades back into darkness, and the debris field becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding seabed. The temperature remains constant. The pressure remains absolute. Above, the surface of the ocean continues its motion, and far above that, the world continues without awareness of this place. Here, nothing needs attention, nothing requires response, and nothing changes quickly. The objects remain, the water remains, and in this steady, unbroken stillness, there is no need to continue observing. The descent is complete, the inventory is finished, the ocean holds what it holds, and you can rest. The water here moves in layers, each one sliding past the next with no friction, no resistance. At this depth, temperature gradients create boundaries that act almost like separate rooms in the same building, each maintaining its own character, its own density. The coldest water settles lowest, hovering just above the sediment, while slightly warmer currents pass overhead in broad, invisible rivers that flow across the Atlantic basin without ever reaching the surface. These deep currents move at the pace of continental drift, traveling distances that would span nations, but doing so over months and years rather than hours. They carry with them the chemical signature of distant places, traces of Antarctic melt, particles from hydrothermal vents thousands of miles away, microscopic shells of organisms that lived and died in surface waters decades ago. All of this passes over the wreck site without disturbing it, without even acknowledging its presence. The Titanic rests within this system as a passive participant. It does not redirect the flow. It does not create turbulence. The currents move around the whole sections, and debris, with the same indifference they show to natural rock formations and seamounts. There is no preference, no special treatment. The wreck is simply another feature of the topography, and the ocean treats it accordingly. Sediment falls continuously from above, though calling it falling suggests a speed that does not exist here. These particles descend so slowly that their movement cannot be observed even over the course of hours. They are the remains of surface life, fragments of shells, microscopic plant matter, dust from distant continents carried out to sea by wind and deposited into the water. All of it drifts downward through the water column, taking weeks to complete the journey from sunlight to sea floor. When these particles finally reach the bottom, they settle without sound, adding imperceptible layers to everything below. The rate of accumulation is measured in millimeters per 1,000 years. Over the decades since the sinking, the sediment has added only the thinnest covering to horizontal surfaces, barely enough to measure, certainly not enough to obscure the objects beneath. A plate lying face up accumulates this dust, just as the steel deck plates do, just as the scattered coal does, each surface receiving its share with perfect equality. The chemistry of the water itself is remarkably stable. Salt content varies only slightly across the entire depth range. Oxygen levels remain low but constant, neither rising nor falling with the seasons, since seasons do not reach this far down. The pressure, at approximately 6,000 pounds per square inch, compresses everything uniformly. Water at this pressure is noticeably denser than surface water, though the difference would only be apparent if you could somehow compare them side by side. This density affects how things move here. A current that would create visible ripples on the surface produces almost no visible effect at depth. The water is too compressed, too heavy to ripple easily. Instead, movement occurs in broad, slow shifts, entire masses of water sliding past each other like tectonic plates, taking hours to complete motions that would happen in seconds above. The wreck sits within this environment without protest, without adjustment. The bow section, driven into the sediment by the force of impact, has not shifted position since it struck the bottom in 1912. The stern section, which landed more chaotically, has similarly remained fixed. Between them, the debris field spreads across the seabed in a pattern that was established within hours of the sinking and has not changed since. Individual objects within this field maintain their positions with equal permanence. A boot lies sole up on the sediment, its leather long since consumed by bacteria, but its shape preserved by the harder materials woven into its construction. It has not moved, it will not move. The currents here are insufficient to relocate anything heavier than the finest sediment particles. Nearby, a cluster of tiles from the ship's Turkish baths rests in a small pile, their glazed surfaces still showing the geometric patterns that decorated one of the ship's luxury spaces. The glaze protects them from dissolution. The ocean cannot break down glass easily, not on any timescale that matters to human observation. These tiles will outlast the steel hull by centuries, perhaps millennia, remaining colourful and intact long after every metal component has returned to oxide and rust. The darkness here is not merely the absence of light, but the absence of the possibility of light. No surface illumination penetrates to this depth. The water column above absorbs every wavelength progressively, red light disappearing within the first few dozen feet, then orange, yellow, green, and finally blue, until at around 1,000 feet, even the last traces vanish completely. Below that point, for the remaining 11,500 feet to the seafloor, there is only blackness. This darkness is not empty, however. Bioluminescent organisms produce brief sparks and glows as they move through the water, though none of these creatures approach the wreck site with any regularity. They follow food sources and chemical signals, navigating a three-dimensional space where the Titanic is neither an obstacle nor a destination, merely an irrelevant presence. Occasionally, a fish passes through the debris field. Deep-sea species at this depth tend towards specific body plans, either small and transparent or larger and heavily reinforced to withstand the pressure. Their movements are economical, evolved to conserve energy in an environment where food is scarce and unpredictable. They do not investigate the wreck out of curiosity. If they pass near an opening in the hull, they may enter, searching for the small crustaceans and worms that inhabit the structure, but this is purely functional behavior, no different from investigating any other cavity or crevice on the seafloor. The fish moves on, following chemical traces through the darkness, and the wreck returns to stillness. The water continues its slow circulation. The pressure remains constant. The temperature does not change. Here, at the bottom of the Atlantic, there is no schedule to keep, no destination to reach, no task left incomplete. Everything rests exactly as it should. The ocean holds what it holds. The darkness continues. And there is nothing more that needs your attention now. You can let go. You can rest. The sediment beneath the wreck extends downward for hundreds of feet, layer upon layer of accumulated time, compressed into a geological record that predates the ship by millions of years. The Titanic rests on top of this archive without reading it, without disturbing it. The weight of the hull sections has pressed into the uppermost layer, creating shallow depressions that mirror their shapes, but these impressions extend only inches deep. Below that, the sediment remains as it was before the ship arrived, and as it will remain long after the last trace of steel has dissolved. This sediment is not uniform. Cores taken from the Atlantic floor reveal variations in composition that correspond to changes in ocean chemistry, shifts in deep water circulation, periods of increased volcanic activity on the surface. Each layer tells a story, though the ocean does not read stories. It simply deposits material, year after year, century after century, building a record that no one consults and that requires no interpretation to exist. The wreck adds its own contribution to this process. As the steel corrodes, particles of iron oxide detach and settle onto the seafloor, mixing with the organic sediment. This rust becomes part of the geological layer currently forming, a thin signature of human presence that will eventually be compressed beneath future deposits, buried and forgotten, transformed into a mineral band that might someday puzzle a geologist who has no context for what a ship was or why it would rest here. But that is far in the future, farther than memory can reach. For now, the rust continues its slow descent, particle by particle, adding microscopic weight to the sediment below. The process requires no observation. It continues in darkness, in silence, without witness. The steel itself changes gradually. Oxidation does not happen at a uniform rate across all surfaces. Areas exposed to currents corrode slightly faster than sheltered sections, though the difference is measured in decades rather than days. Rivets corrode at their own pace, affected by the specific alloy used in their manufacture, by their position within the structure, by factors too numerous and too subtle to catalogue completely. Some sections of the hull have developed what appear to be rust formations, structures that resemble stalactites in their downward growth, though they form through different chemistry. These formations, called rusticles, hang from overhangs and protrusions, their surfaces textured in ways that create microscopic habitats for bacteria. The bacteria consume the iron, converting it into forms they can metabolize, producing the rust as a byproduct. They work slowly, generation after generation, replacing themselves continuously but changing nothing about their method or their pace. The Rusticles do not grow uniformly. Some reach lengths of several feet, while others remain stunted, their growth limited by the available surface area or by the particular currents that pass across them. They are fragile despite their appearance and would crumble easily if touched, though nothing here touches them. They hang in place, growing imperceptibly, adding length that cannot be observed even over months of continuous watching. Inside the wreck, in the spaces that once held machinery and cargo, the darkness is even more complete. No current reaches these interior spaces with any force. The water here has been still for decades, moving only when disturbed by the rare passage of a submersible or the collapse of a structural element. This water has had time to reach perfect equilibrium with its surroundings, matching the temperature and chemistry of everything it touches. Objects in these interior spaces remain exactly as they settled. A wrench lies against a bulkhead, positioned at an angle determined by the ship's final orientation. A section of pipe, broken free during the descent, rests across a doorway that no longer leads anywhere. These objects do not shift. The stillness here is absolute in a way that even the exterior debris field cannot match. The only changes in these spaces come from the gradual weakening of the structure itself. Metal fatigues slowly under the constant pressure. Connections between plates weaken as rivets corrode. Every few years, somewhere within the wreck, something gives way. A deck beam collapses, a wall panel detaches, a ceiling section falls. These events make no sound that travels beyond the immediate vicinity. The water absorbs the energy of the collapse, and within moments, everything is still again. The ship is returning to its constituent materials, but it is doing so without urgency, without drama. There's no threshold moment when it will cease to be recognizable as a ship. The process is gradual enough that every stage appears permanent. Every configuration seems as though it could last indefinitely. The wreck today looks largely as it did 50 years ago. The wreck 50 years from now will look largely as it does today. Change occurs, but it occurs beneath the threshold of human perception of time. Surrounding the wreck, the seafloor extends in all directions, flat and featureless, covered in the same fine sediment that has accumulated over the debris field. Occasionally, this monotony is broken by a rock that has travelled here from some distant location, carried by ancient ice and dropped when the ice melted. But these rocks are rare. Mostly, there is only sediment, smooth and uninterrupted, stretching toward the horizons that do not exist in the darkness. The abyssal plain, as this type of seafloor is called, represents one of the most stable environments on Earth. Temperature variations are negligible. Pressure remains constant. Seasonal changes from the surface never penetrate here. The currents move with regularity that can be measured over years and found to vary only slightly. In this stability, the wreck has found a resting place that will preserve it far longer than any museum could. No sunlight will fade the colors that remain. No rain will accelerate corrosion. No freeze-thaw cycles will crack materials. No human activity will disturb the site beyond the occasional research visit. The ocean, in its depth and its darkness, provides protection through indifference, preserving through isolation what it claimed through disaster. The bow section continues to point forward, though forward has no meaning here. The stern section rests at an angle. its structure more damaged, its form less recognizable, but equally permanent in its current configuration. Between them, the debris field serves as a bridge, a scattered connection between two pieces of what was once a unified whole. Each object in this field occupies its space without question. A piece of coal, originally destined to feed the ship's boilers, now sits on the sediment, its chemical composition unchanged, its purpose erased. It will remain coal for centuries, possibly millennia, slowly releasing carbon back into the water at a rate too slow to measure with any practical instrument. A glass bottle, once containing wine or spirits, rests on its side, its contents long since diffused into the surrounding ocean. The glass itself remains intact, its surface smooth, its transparency lost to a thin coating of mineral deposits, but its structure sound. Glass is nearly inert in seawater. This bottle will outlast nearly every other artifact in the debris field. Metal objects fare less well. A candlestick, its silver plating corroded away, has been reduced to a core of base metal that itself continues to corrode. Eventually it will lose its shape entirely, collapsing into a small pile of rust that will be indistinguishable from any other oxidized metal. But this endpoint remains decades away, perhaps longer. For now, the candlestick retains enough structural integrity to be recognized, enough form to suggest its original purpose. Personal items scattered throughout the debris field carry no more significance than structural components. A shoe, its organic materials consumed, persists only as an outline in the sediment where harder materials like eyelets and buckles remain. A handbag, its contents dispersed, marks a location where someone once placed something they valued. These objects are neither more nor less important than the deck chairs and the pipes, the tiles and the machinery. The ocean makes no distinction. All materials face the same processes, the same gradual transformation, the same eventual return to simpler forms. The water above the wreck continues its motion, cycling through patterns established by forces operating on a global scale. The Atlantic's deep circulation connects to the Antarctic, to the Arctic, to every ocean basin on Earth. Water that passes over the Titanic today may have last seen daylight decades ago, in a different hemisphere, under circumstances unrelated to this site. It will return to the surface eventually, drawn upward by currents and mixing processes that operate over centuries, completing a cycle that has no awareness of the wreck it passes. In this circulation, the ocean demonstrates a timescale that makes human history seem momentary. The wreck has been here for more than a century, but the water has been cycling for millions of years. The sediment has been accumulating for tens of millions of years. The ocean basin itself formed over hundreds of millions of years as continents drifted apart. Against these timescales, the Titanic's presence is barely perceptible, a minor addition to an ancient landscape, a temporary structure in a permanent system. Yet within its own context, the wreck is complete. It represents a finished process, a concluded event. The sinking happened, the descent ended, the impact occurred. Now, only the aftermath remains, and the aftermath is simply existence without event, presence without change, time passing without marking itself in any obvious way. The temperature at the seafloor holds steady at just above freezing, cold enough to slow all biological and chemical processes, but not cold enough to freeze the salt water. This coldness is part of the preservation, part of the reason the wreck remains as intact as it does. In warmer water, bacteria would consume organic materials more quickly, corrosion would proceed at a faster pace, and structural collapse would advance more rapidly. Here, the cold slows everything to a pace that appears, within human observation, to be almost stillness. The darkness too plays a role. Without light, there are no photosynthetic organisms to colonize surfaces, no algae to grow and die and create additional layers of organic material. The biological community at this depth is sparse, limited to organisms that can survive on the small amount of organic matter that drifts down from above, or on the chemosynthetic processes occurring at hydrothermal vents elsewhere on the ocean floor. The wreck is not a thriving ecosystem, it is simply a structure, colonized only minimally, remaining largely as it was. This emptiness, this absence of life in abundance contributes to the site's stillness. There is no competition for space, no dynamic between predator and prey playing out across the debris field, no seasonal cycles of growth and decay. Things simply exist and continue to exist until they gradually stop existing, replaced by nothing in particular, simply absorbed back into the environment that surrounds them. And so the wreck remains. The bow rests where it drove into the sediment. The stern lies where it fell. The debris field spreads between them, each object in its place, each item settled, each artifact at rest. The ocean moves overhead in its slow patterns, the darkness continues, the pressure holds everything in place. The cold preserves, the time passes. There is nothing left to discover here that changes anything. No new understanding waits to be found. The site has been documented, measured, photographed, studied. What remains is simply the ongoing process of existing, of persisting, of gradually becoming something else while appearing to remain the same. The water is still, the sediment is stable, the steel corrodes at its measured pace, and far above, beyond the reach of sunlight, beyond the realm of human concern, the surface of the ocean continues its motion, unaware and undisturbed. Here, at the bottom, there is only rest, only stillness, only the quiet continuation of time passing through darkness. You can rest now. Everything here has found its place. Nothing requires your attention. The inventory is complete. The observation is finished. The wreck remains and will continue to remain without need for witnesses. You can let go. You can close your eyes. The ocean holds what it holds, and you can rest.